then there was kind of a backup in case there was a less than desirable result to our bike ride. It reminds me, I was thinking about this as I was writing it, reminds me about the president during the Apollo program, and the president sat down and he had 2 press releases wrote well and they were going to come home, and then one, if everything didn't go well. Kind of did that with this week's sermon just because never quite knew what was going to happen yesterday until we got out there. But this week we're going to continue our series on our membership vows. Every year for Stewardship, I think it's good and healthy for the church to be called back to its core values. And for United Methodist, our core values, apart from the normal values we share with every other denomination, Jesus Christ is Lord of all, through grace we're saved, things like that that are key to just Christianity in general. But what makes us distinctly United Methodist comes at the end of that, and there are 5 membership vows. And as a United Methodist, as we saw last week as we had folks join our church, we vow with one another, so we promise at the altar before God and everyone, that we will uphold each other in our prayers, our presence, our gifts, our service, and our witness. So each year, I think it's healthy for us to be called back to those core values and ideals that build the foundation of our identity. And so we talked about our prayers, and this year we talked about how prayers aren't something flippant, they're not something that we simply issue to God when we want something, but they're how we grow in communicating with our Creator. And then last week we talked about presence, and that we are called to be a people of real presence, not someone who just shows up on Sunday, but to be a real presence in the very image of Christ, not just here, but everywhere in our community. And this week we're going to build upon that and talk about giving, or the fact that we vow to uphold one another in our church with our gifts. And it's probably the most fun, because everyone loves the week or the month that you talk about money in church. Everyone just loves that. So very little. I know, because I just spent the last 2 weeks preparing a projected budget for the next year. So I'm very acquainted with how much people don't like that. But I want us to focus less on just the monetary aspect of giving. Now, don't hear me wrong. Monetary giving is important because it's what keeps the lights on. If you look over your head and you see the lit light bulbs above us, that is because people give to the general budget. And if people did not give to the general budget, those lights would not be on. It's a very simple reality of our world. So I don't want you to hear that the general budget is not important. It's a foundational piece of what powers ministry on in our church. But I'm here to tell you, if you only write a check to keep the lights on, you're missing out on the importance of what giving really is and what giving really can do for you. In the book of Proverbs, the author, in a section of chapter 18 that really is just them machine gunning wise quotes and little bits of wisdom at the audience, he gets down to verse 16 and he writes, "A gift opens the way for access to important people." It almost sounds like bribery a little bit, but it's not. I don't think it is. Now, you could think of it as bribery if you simplify giving as just an exchange of monetary value from one to another, a transaction for goods or services. But if you develop a spiritual understanding of giving, it takes a different meaning. I think that the author intends us to understand, and I think what Jesus really drives home in all of his discussions about giving is the fact that giving is not the action itself, but giving is something that begins in the heart and then overflows into our behaviors. something that starts on the inside and works its way out. And as such, it takes time and practice. When I signed up for the bike race, it was terrifying because I'd never ridden more than 3 or 4 miles, and so the prospect of riding 50 miles up several hundred feet of elevation was terrifying. And to get there, it took preparation and training. And bit by bit you went. You'd ride a few miles, and it was the middle of summer, and it was hot, and it was miserable. You'd ride a few miles, and you're like, that was less than 1/10 of my route that I'm going to take. I'm never going to get this done. It's going to be miserable and painful. And then a few weeks later, you rode a little farther, and you thought the same thing. And then the first cold front comes through, you ride a little bit farther, and you think, okay, this might be doable, until weeks before, you're riding most of the distance, and you're like, okay, maybe this is going to happen, and you get there and you do it, and when you do it, you get done, and other than feeling in pain and sore and tired, you feel great. If you've ever done any major physical activity, if you've run a marathon, a 5K, if you've worked up after physical therapy to walking again, it's a similar experience. You begin in a pit, and all that you can see is the negativity pushing you down. And with each small step up, you can see just a little bit more of the light at the end of the tunnel until you crest over the end of that pit and you stand in the bright light of day. And you look back and you can see how far you've come. Giving is like that, in such a way that when we begin to give, we sit in that pit, and we don't know if we can really give, whether it's money, or time, or our talents. But as we begin to give, it begins to get a little easier and a little more achievable. Our heart begins to get a little softer and more malleable. Where you used to turn a cold shoulder to the people you saw walking the street corners, you begin to think about them and empathize them. Where you've seen children suffering in our community, you begin to think, what do they eat when they go home? What kind of house do they go to? As you see people suffering, you begin, as you make that ascent up from the pit, you begin to develop an empathy that only comes with giving of yourself. And not just a financial transaction on Sunday morning when the plates pass, but a giving that really begins in the heart and flows out of you. And with each passing step up out of the pit, your heart becomes a little softer and more open to the people around you until you can't help but give of yourself to those who you see, know, and empathize with. I think that's what Jesus talks about when he talks about giving. And why I think that is because giving, especially money, is the number one issue Jesus talks about in the New Testament. Second to none. The number one thing that God, wrapped in human flesh, comes and talks to us about is giving. The most references, the most stories, the most parables, all of them, in majority, are about giving. And it's never a specific amount, But each one of his stories are endemic of giving that begins in the heart and flows out in empathy to the community around them. For example, the old widow's offering. Jesus tells a parable of a rich man who piles money on the altar before God in the temple and is smug and proud of his offering. But then a widow hobbles up and she gives her 2 cents, her last 2 cents. I promise you, the priest who did the temple budget didn't even notice that 2 cents was given. But in God's eyes, because of the intent and the giving that flowed out of her heart, it was worth more than all of the money that the rich man gave. Or you could talk about one of the biggest parables a lot of people like to quote that Jesus uses, the parable of the sheep and the goats. Jesus sets about and he begins talking about the end of days and how everyone will be divided and judged, and some people really like that whole idea of dividing and judging. And he says some people will be put on my left and they're the goats and they're going to go to hell and they have a bad future waiting for them, and some of them are sheep which will go with me into eternal paradise. And he said, you know how you know the difference between the two? You think the sheep are the ones that said the right thing and did the right thing and wore the right clothes and watched the right TV and followed the right rules? No. Jesus told them the sheep are the ones who saw their neighbor and they needed a drink and they gave it to them. Saw someone who was hungry and gave them some food, or someone who was naked and gave them some clothes. The sheep are the ones who saw the people suffering and decided to do something about it because their hearts were so moved. They gave from an overflowing of love. And he said the goats, some of the goats, even though they cast out demons and they do these miraculous signs in my name, the goats were the ones who saw these folks suffering, hungry, homeless, thirsty, and did nothing. Though they worked miraculous signs and though they cast demons out in my name, Jesus goes on in Luke's Gospel, I knew them not. The most important message that God came to give us when he walked the earth as Jesus Christ was about giving, not just as a transaction, but an attitude or posture that we develop throughout our life. A journey that we begin and slowly train up to do. Something that is more valuable than a check or money, something that has more weight in humanity than a bank account or an investment account. It's a gift from the heart. And it means more to Christ than all of the money of this world. That we would give with that right heart. The author writes that a gift opens the way for access to important people. And I don't think we quite realize that until it happens. But when you give empathetically with your heart, people are drawn to you like a moth to flame. They want to be around you because they know you honestly care. You honestly care. And that might not seem like a lot, but I want you to think about that in the context of our current world. A world that is overrun by advertisement, and not just any old advertisement, but advertisement by artificial intelligence that pinpoints your exact desires and wants. You ever thought it was creepy? You were looking at something on Amazon, and you go to search for something online, and all the ads pop up with something that was similar? Hyper-targeted advertising, a world that is really just trying to get as many people as possible to buy into their side, or into their argument, or into their political motivations. Everything is peppered with some sort of bias or desire to color your worldview. Everything from the kind of shoes you wear to who you vote for, to what you do with your money. But when people encounter someone who is different, someone who honestly cares out of the love and desire of their heart for one another, they are drawn to that like a moth to flame because it is so different than the world we live in. It is something better than the culture we exist in. Because someone who gives and gives out of their heart displays a type of care that is altruistic. A type of care that desires not for whether they get anything or gain anything out of the gift, but desires only for what is best for the other person. It's not like this world of advertisement that's trying to sell you a political view or another item on Amazon, even if it'll be Prime to you in 2 days. Free. But when you meet someone who honestly cares and gives of their heart, the way Jesus taught, it's refreshing. Because for once you see and hear something where the person communicating desires nothing from you. They don't need you to do something. They don't need you to buy something or believe in something or vote for something. They just want what is best for you. And in giving of our heart, we can become and come into contact with people who honestly care. People who desire the best for us and for everyone with no expectation of return. And those are the most important people. The very most important people to know in our life. They may not be the most powerful. They may not be the wealthiest. They may not be the most politically connected. They might not go and shake the pillars of the political system or sell the most things or drive the nicest cars. But those people, those caring and loving and authentically humble people, they're so important to know. Because at the end of the day, when we stand before the throne of God, and Jesus divides the sheep from the goats, He will turn to those people. And He'll say, "Well, good and well done, my faithful servants. Come with me to paradise." Let your heart be convicted to give, not just as one who drops a check in the plate when it's passed, but one who gives out of an overflowing love that begins in your heart and pours out into all of the things that you do, all of the people that you touch, and all of the places
that you go, that everyone might know that you really care. And you might not get there overnight. You might not do it as soon as you leave this place, but wherever you are on your journey to giving like that, and no matter how hard it might feel, continue to put one step or one foot in front of the other, and step by step you will get to the point where you give lovingly and empathetically of yourself. And for some of us it might happen overnight, some of us it might take a lifetime. And a whole bunch of us fall somewhere in between. But wherever you are in that journey of giving, continue to move towards the kind of giving Christ talks about. A giving of the heart, an attitude and posture towards everyone that gives not for your own desire, but for the welfare and the well-being of all around you. And in doing so, at the end of the day, you'll find yourself with the sheep. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.